Well, since I've got a lot of downtime related to this injury, figured I'd get caught up on some stuff, one of which being Halloween, finally, because I bought the recent trilogy. So talking about Halloween 2018, just... whoa. I'm impressed. I mean, like, it was a slow start, but at the same time, you got the idea that they were trying with Michael and bringing it into the next, generation, with those YouTube podcast people showing that Laurie ended up marrying, having a daughter who has a daughter of her own now, who's now almost the same age that Laurie was at the beginning of the first one, though she does act less mature, but that's how generations have changed since the 70s and all that stuff, So, makes sense. And then the way that they did the killings here, I felt were the right mixture of brutal, but not over the top. Maybe they were a little longer than necessary, but it worked with this franchise. And again, if it's not over the top, like a couple of the things that Rob Zombie did, even though it did add to the darkness and brutality of his movies, because that's what he wanted. He wanted the brutality cranked up to 11. Based on what little I've seen of House of a Thousand Corpses, it seems to be fitting with his style. Then the little bits that the supporting characters got, it was a little bit more than I expected. That's not to say that they haven't tried to include some supporting characters in this franchise before. Halloween 5, Daniel Harris's character in the Rob Zombie movies, they've tried it before, but this time it felt like that they were just doing more in there, because I think that they have a couple of the police characters be recurring in later movies, and it just added to it. I thought it was good. And I also like how they did an interesting bit where they're trying to show Michael's mask in here be like a hybrid of the original style and Rob Zombie's style, because you could tell that his mask had aged, but not nearly as much as the Rob Zombie bit. So it looks a lot more like the mask that you're used to seeing, but it's different, and I really appreciated that. Unlike when you went to Halloween's 4 and 5, where the mask clearly looked different, but it was just the same as ever, even though he's older, Yeah. And how the movie ended, it was an intense fight, and I'm glad that all of the members of Laurie's family ended up surviving it. Oh yeah, her son-in-law didn't survive, but you gotta have somebody that's important die in there, and unfortunately the kid who had a crush on Laurie's granddaughter, he wasn't enough to take care of that, and it does actually make Karen more willing to do things. At least I think her name was Karen. I've been watching too many things that have Karens in them. Just, ugh. And no, I'm not trying to joke upon the name, okay? Even though, coincidentally, most of the Karens I found on the internet suck, but that's just coincidence. Right. So what do I rate this? 4 out of 5 personal. Critique... Wait. Did I say 4 out of 5 or 4.5? I meant to say 4.5 if I didn't say that. So yeah, 4.5 personal. Critique. Can't decide if I want to do 4 or 4.5, but it's one of those two. I really loved this. This was a great way to bring the franchise back to a more acceptable bit, and if they had ended it here, which I think was the plan originally, that would have been great if they had done that. But of course, sequelitis, and at the same time, this is Halloween. Every time we feel like that the franchise has a great way to end, itself on, they decide to continue it. So, what do we get? We get Halloween Kills, which does the typical Halloween sequel business, come up with a sequel that is much more brutal than the movie that came before it. Isn't as good, but nonetheless feels like it has its place in the franchise, mostly because we're just used to the idea of weaker sequels, even though I do applaud them for trying in here, because they did try. Like, the bit in the beginning about bringing in other town locals and trying to make them be more prominent, because for most of this movie, Laurie is confined to a hospital bed. I felt that was good. Yeah, I didn't like this version of Tommy Doyle as much, but he's been a minor character in other movies. They're trying to do something different with him, and even then, I don't think we're supposed to like him. Huh? It's just like with the typical bad person in sitcoms. You're not supposed to like them, but you enjoy seeing them because of what they do and how they fail at it. We're not always going to like a big character in a movie. Or a comic book movie, huh? That's pretty much the only territory left with comic book films, making them all less likable. So, yeah, they tried. And then that, killing of the mentally deranged, patient, brutal, but it fit. This franchise hasn't ever done anything like that, and it was good. And the continuation of the law enforcement people, that was good, although the cop that missed Michael, or basically let him go, that was a storyline that I didn't feel like really fit in that well. And then the Matt character that faced Michael, didn't feel like it was that great of a plot line that they added in there, really. Though I will applaud the ending, because you did actually think, nah, he's gonna get up and just fight everybody, he'll come back and do some more, but then they carry it on long enough that you're thinking maybe, just maybe, it did happen this time, and then nope, you're proven wrong, and then he goes and attacks everybody, then he goes and finds Karen and kills her. Yeah. Brutal, but it worked well with the franchise, and it's a great way to get Laurie back on her feet and ready to go after Michael again, and it also does well for setting her granddaughter off, because you could tell that they were totally planning on using her more than Laurie's actual daughter, so removing her from the equation, nice way to keep at it, And I do like the fact that her granddaughter did a little more in this movie, because in the prior movie, she was the innocent girl that gets stalked, but we've seen that role before. How she did more this time, that was good, and I also like how they continued the storyline with her boyfriend a little bit, which would make sense, because this movie takes place literally a couple hours after the previous one. So I do applaud them for trying, but at the same time, we didn't need the movie, and yeah, but again, we're used to this kind of feel with the sequels in this franchise. We are. So, I'm definitely going to go 4-3 on here, but the question is, which one do I give the 4? Because I really feel like I could go either way. Well, I feel like the easier way to do it is say free critique 4 personal, so I think I'm going to do that. Yeah, I've thought too much about it. Besides, it's just one installment in a continuity bit anyway, where they're just setting up what's going to happen at the beginning of this one. And I was really bothered by the fact that they skipped ahead in the timeline, because it just it carried a disjointed feel for that film in regards to the prior two. Like, you believed at the beginning of the 2018 one that the first two movies took place before this. You believed that in a heartbeat. And you know that the reboot and Halloween Kills occurred before this one. You know that because the movie did carry a similar tone to the others, but it wasn't as good. It was more negative, although I think that has to do with the PTSD that Laurie's going through and the fact that her granddaughter had reached a stage in her life where she felt like she was too bogged down by the people around her, is getting rebellious, which is fairly natural for somebody in that age group. And then the fact that everyone had moved on, thinking that it was over, even though they know that he got away, so they shouldn't be thinking that. But, yeah. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention the new Doctor in, the reboot, well, not reboot movie, but continuation movie. Part of me felt it was stupid that he turned out to be bad, but at the same time, it did kind of make sense. The way that he behaved, yeah. Okay, moving on from him. And then the introduction of Rick, it provided an interesting connection with Laurie's granddaughter. Sorry that I keep referring to him as that, but I honestly can't remember her name, unfortunately. I should have made this review a little bit sooner. But, you know, having two messed up people, having a connection. But then the fact that the movie turned out to be more about him than Michael, and how it seemed like the two of them had a silent agreement, but then get disputes between them, but it's on Rick's bit. It just... they could have done that bit better, and then it would have been a little more justified, but since they were clearly trying to continue it, it didn't work as well. And then a couple of characters in here, how they introduced them only really so that we can get some admittedly brutal kills, but that don't actually matter that much in the movie. It just... not so good, you know. So this movie had the potential to do something. It didn't really work out that way. But then the last 10-ish minutes where you have the final confrontation between Laurie and Michael, and then how her granddaughter shows up and actually helps Laurie properly defeat Michael, even though you had the interesting dynamic where Laurie actually is responsible for Rick dying, and her granddaughter at first freaks out about it, but then she just comes back. It's interesting, done badly, and yet it works all at the same time. It's an odd feeling, isn't it? But like but then that final confrontation and how they dispose of his body in a wood chopper with that whole procession showing that, yeah, this time he is definitively dead. That was good. Now, does it make up for the movie? Hell no! It does not. But it was a good way to finally wrap up the this timeline and potentially the franchise as we know it, because they're going to continue this franchise. 100% they will continue it, but come on, guys, do what Jurassic Park is doing. Reboot it from the ground up. Enough with what you're doing like with Texas Chainsaw, where you ignore everything except for either the first movie or the first two. Just start over, okay? Jamie Lee Curtis has more than given an indication that she's tired of this. Because you gotta remember, they killed off her character before, and then she comes back for another reboot. Yeah, start it over, people. It's time for that. What do I rate this one? 2 out of 5, and we'll call it good. Later.